the number of Americans filing for first-time unemployment benefits, it dropped last week. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, initial jobless claims fell to 229,000 for the week ending June 18th. That's 2,000 fewer than the previous week. Let's bring in CBS News reporter Sarah Ewall-Wice now to dig deeper there into the numbers. Sarah, good morning to you. What do these figures signal now about the state of the economy today?
Well, when you look specifically at initial jobless claims, these are good numbers. As you mentioned, the initial claims last week were down ever so slightly. They're about what economists were anticipating ahead of the report that came out this morning. Continued claims, the number of people on unemployment, that is also about 1.3 million. That is a near historic low. So initial claims are near historic low, continued claims are near historic low. So these are good numbers. They come as there have been a number of growing concerns over where the number of jobs in this country and unemployment are headed. There's a lot of concerns over a recession. More and more companies are talking about potential layoffs. So economists this morning were saying these numbers are not going to be something that raised concerns. Essentially, it looks like the claims have either leveled off or plateaued at this time. Just a few weeks ago, over the Memorial Day weekend, we saw the largest number of initial claims since January. And so that had set off additional concerns over whether we would see these start to go back up. That isn't happening at this time. I think economists will continue to be watching these extremely closely moving forward. But based on these specific numbers, no concerns yet.
Sarah, I'm on an emotional roller coaster here. We keep talking about all these different indicators, and I was all worried because the chairman Powell said, a recession is a possibility, and you were talking about layoffs in certain sectors, and now this number looks pretty good. I don't know how to weigh these different indicators. What means what? So at least with this one, why is it that jobs numbers are considered a good indicator of economic health?
Well, obviously, when you're talking about jobs numbers, you want more and more people to be employed. When businesses are concerned about the economy and the future, that could lead to additional layoffs. So we don't want to see those numbers go back up. That could be a bad indicator of things to come in a time, as you mentioned, of extreme uncertainty. Like, that is really a challenge right now, figuring out where we are. But there are so many different factors involved when you look at the health of the economy. So while jobless claims are near historic lows, we see the unemployment rate that is near pre-pandemic levels at this time at 3.6%. We had a very strong jobs report in June. Those are good signs for the economy, for unemployment. Those are things that are part of this much larger equation. The real challenge here is on the other side of this in terms of inflation. I know you and I have spoken about this numerous times now. That is where the real challenges are right now. And when you talk specifically about the economy, a smaller number of people are obviously impacted by the layoffs specifically or unemployment right now. So while it's continued to be pretty good numbers, less people are feeling that. Obviously, had we been speaking about unemployment back in 2020, there were 28 million people who were facing unemployment. Millions of people were on unemployment claims. That was the real focus. Now, those numbers are down. Those are good. They're better than people and economists had anticipated at this stage in the coronavirus pandemic. But we have this other factor of prices and inflation. And while I don't want to downplay it, millions of people are dealing with unemployment or unemployment benefits, many, many more people across the country, pretty much everyone, are feeling the impact of prices going up.
Right.
So when you talk to people, they're not focused on, well, I've had a job for some time, but they have to look at how are they putting food on the table? How are they paying to put gas in the car to go to those jobs that they have? So that's a larger group of people who are dealing with it. That leads to a lot more challenges for them. When you look at polling, obviously, a number of polls have shown that people believe the economy is headed in the wrong direction because they're feeling the impact of that other aspect of the economy much more profoundly right now. Interestingly enough, I will say, we look at polls, specifically the Washington Post had a poll recently that said people are changing their habits because of higher prices. More people expect inflation to continue. But when it comes to their specific personal financial well-being, people are pretty confident about their future still, and that is a good sign as well. So really all over the map here.
It's a fascinating aspect of the conversation because we're speaking about raw data plus emotions and feelings and your beliefs in what's happening next. And all of that makes up how we behave in this economy. So what about what's coming next? Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testified before the Senate Banking Committee yesterday. So what were the key takeaways from that hearing? He's certainly interested in keeping everybody calm and confident.
Yes, I mean, keeping people confident is a big role here, and laying out where the Fed is going to go in advance so that people know the path they're following is also very important. So there are a couple of takeaways. I was talking about inflation. When it comes to the Federal Reserve Chairman's testimony yesterday, he did talk specifically about raising interest rates. That is what the Fed is doing to put downward pressure on inflation. Obviously, he had the Fed announced its latest rate hike, the largest hike in nearly 30 years last week. He did say that interest rate hikes will continue as long as appropriate. Last week, when he was announcing that Fed hike of the interest rate, he did say they expect additional rates throughout the rest of this year, bringing the federal funds rate to 3.5%, between 3 and 3.5% by the end of the year. So that will continue as appropriate. They say they're looking at the data. The other thing here that was focused on specifically is whether the U.S. is going into a recession. And, you know, he was asked specifically by Senator Tester whether raising interest rates too much, too quickly, will put the U.S. into a recession, because, of course, this is a balancing act. And he said there is the possibility. So he is saying there is a possibility of a recession. Obviously, that is not their goal. He says that cooling off inflation, that balancing act that they have, it'll be very challenging to do that without putting the U.S. into the recession. He said no one's saying that's going to be easy. So that is another part of this that they're looking at, they'll continue to look at. But he said a recession isn't likely at this point in time, and pushed back on forecasting that so far out. He said those are not usually something you can forecast far out. But the last thing I want to bring up specifically about this testimony that he gave is there are a number of factors involved that are outside the Fed's control. While the Fed can move to put pressure to lower inflation by raising rates across the country more quickly than congressional action, he did note that some of the inflation is outside of their purview. So he can focus on demand. The Fed can focus on demand. The supply side is a challenge. So there are supply chain issues still at play here. That's not something that they can control, and how those go moving forward with the coronavirus pandemic. The other factor at play here is the war in Ukraine. That introduces another element of uncertainty. So looking at energy prices, looking at food prices, those can continue to go up even as the Fed raises interest rates to put pressure on inflation more broadly across the board.
And the thing about it is those are the sectors that really impact people the most. I mean, that's what you feel sort of every week when you go do your grocery shopping or whatever. Sarah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.